It doesn't happen all at once. It begins as a small awareness. A wrongness. A warmth where there shouldn't be one. A thought she doesn't finish. Karen notices it in the way her hands linger at the sink, fingers resting against porcelain long after the water is off. In the way she listens too carefully to footsteps moving through the house. In the way silence suddenly feels crowded. She tells herself it's exhaustion. That grief does strange things. That dislocation has a texture. Still, something keeps pressing forward. Earlier, she stood in the doorway of the guest room, watching someone fold a blanket that didn't belong to them. A slow, ordinary motion. Corners aligned. Fabric smoothed twice, as if once wasn't enough. Nothing about it should have mattered. And yet, Karen looked away first. Not because she was caught, but because she felt herself becoming someone who could be. There are boundaries she has carried her whole life without questioning. They were never written down. They never needed to be. They existed as a kind of internal gravity, quiet, constant, unquestioned. Until now. Until the gravity shifted. She doesn't know when the shift began. Maybe it was the first night she couldn't sleep. Maybe it was the sound of laughter drifting down the hallway when she was supposed to be alone with her thoughts. Maybe it was the way her name sounded in a voice that held no history with her. No shared past. No disappointment yet. Just presence. Karen keeps waiting for the feeling to pass. For the moment to fold back into its proper shape. But instead it keeps rearranging itself. Subtly. Almost politely. Like something asking for space. She tells herself she is safe. She tells herself nothing has happened. Both things are true. And still, there's a sense, faint, persistent, that something has already begun. Not an event. Not a decision. A tilt. Quiet, irreversible tilt. Karen exhales. Not in relief. Not in surrender. Just enough to keep standing. And somewhere inside that breath, a line she has never crossed before softens, without disappearing. The kettle doesn't scream so much as it insists. Karen watches the thin thread of steam slip from the spout and vanish, as if even the heat knows how to disappear quietly in someone else's house. Her hands are already wrapped around a mug she hasn't earned yet. Thick ceramic, a hairline crack near the handle, the kind of cup that has survived years of ordinary mornings. She tells herself again that she's only here for a week. Just a week. Behind her, the refrigerator hums. The sink holds the soft, clean scent of lemon dish soap. On the table, a small stack of mail. Susan's mail, not hers. Sits like evidence of a life continuing without Karen's permission. The floorboard creaks. Not Susan. The sound is lighter. Barely a sound at all, but Karen's body registers it anyway. The way you register a change in weather before you've looked outside. Ruby comes in without announcing herself. Not in a rude way. In a way that suggests the kitchen belongs to her by muscle memory, by childhood, by the sheer fact of having been hungry here for years. She doesn't say good morning. Instead, she reaches up, plucks a stray strand of hair from the shoulder of her sweater, Karen's sweater, Karen realizes, because she's wearing it, and lets it drift into the trash with a casual flick of her fingers. Peppermint? Ruby asks, as if they've already established a language. Karen blinks once. Twice. I don't. She almost says I don't know what I like anymore, but she stops herself on the first curve of the sentence. Sure. Ruby's mouth shifts, not quite a smile. She opens a cupboard. She doesn't need to search. Her arm extends and returns with a tin of tea, dented at the corners, the label rubbed pale. Karen tightens her grip on the mug without meaning to. The crack under her thumb feels like a tiny seam in the world. A place where something could split if it was pressed too hard. Ruby sets a second mug on the counter, then a spoon, then a little dish of honey. She moves with the slow precision of someone making a small ceremony out of nothing. She doesn't fill the silence with questions. She doesn't ask Karen how she slept, or whether she ate. Instead, she slides the honey dish forward by an inch, as if offering it without making it a gift. Karen's eyes drop to Ruby's hands. Young hands, yes, but not careless. Nails short. A thin silver ring on her index finger that catches the light when she turns her wrist. There's a scar near her knuckle, small, white, old, and Karen is startled by the intimacy of noticing it. She looks away quickly, like the act itself is something she can be caught doing. Ruby doesn't seem to notice. Or she does and chooses not to name it. Outside, a garbage truck grinds down the street, metal clanking against metal, the sound of the world being cleared away. In a week, Karen tells herself, she will be back in her own kitchen. Her own mug. Her own silence. Just a week. Ruby pours water into both cups and the scent of mint rises. Karen inhales without permission. Something in her chest loosens, then tightens again, as if it doesn't trust relief. "You can sit," Ruby says, soft, almost absent-minded, and nods toward the chair by the window. Karen moves because she's told to, because her legs know what to do when given simple instructions. The chair is cool against the backs of her thighs. Sunlight lays a pale rectangle on the table, and Karen watches dust float through it. An entire galaxy of tiny things suspended, unseen until the right light hits them. Ruby sits across from her, close enough that Karen can see the faint sleep crease at the corner of her mouth. Close enough that Karen can hear her breathe. They drink in silence. Not the comfortable kind, at least not yet. The kind that holds its breath. The kind that waits to see who will reach for a topic first. Karen keeps her hands around the mug, as if warmth is something she has to contain. In her head, the last image she saw in her own home arrives again without knocking. The bare skin. The wrong angle of limbs. The too bright shock of a young laugh. The sound her husband made, half gasp, half plea, when Karen's shadow crossed the doorway. 44 years old, and still the part of her that wanted to be polite had tried to retreat. "Sorry, excuse me, I didn't know." Not that. She had closed the door with a careful, stupid gentleness, as if that might keep the moment from becoming true. Then she opened it again, because she needed to know whether reality would change if she looked twice. It hadn't. "A week," she told Susan on the phone, her voice sounding like it belonged to someone else. "Just a week. I don't know what I need." Now she sits in Susan's kitchen with Susan's daughter, and her body is carrying betrayal like a bruise you can stop touching just to confirm it's there. Ruby's spoon clinks once against her mug. "Did you sleep?" Ruby asks finally, not prying, not softened into pity. Just a question placed on the table like a napkin. Karen could lie. The lie would be easy. The lie would keep everything in its proper shape. But she hears herself say, "Not really." Ruby nods as if Karen has reported the weather. She drags her thumb along the edge of her mug, a slow circling motion. Once. Again. Karen's eyes follow it before she can stop them. "I'm sorry," Ruby says, and her voice is quieter now. Not apologetic on behalf of anyone. Just present. Karen's throat tightens. She swallows peppermint and something else. "It's fine," she says reflexively, because she has spent decades making discomfort smaller with words. Then she corrects herself because the correction feels like a kind of honesty. "It's not fine. It's just happening." Ruby holds her gaze for half a beat too long. Not aggressive. Not sweet. Just steady. Karen feels it like pressure on her sternum. Like someone has placed a warm hand there without touching. A gentle intrusion. Ruby looks away first, but she doesn't retreat. She stands, crosses to the sink, and begins rinsing the spoons. The water runs. Her shoulders move with the small rhythm of the task. Karen sits still. This is what she has become, she thinks. A woman who doesn't know how to do anything except wait for the next ache. She watches Ruby rinse and place the spoons on a towel. There's a domestic ease to it that doesn't belong in Karen's life right now. Karen's life is cardboard boxes and legal language and the empty space on her finger where a ring used to sit. She rubs her thumb over that bare skin. Once. Again. She catches herself doing it and presses her hand flat on the table. Ruby turns off the water. The silence returns, but it's different now. It has been broken once and knows it can break again. "Mom's at the gym," Ruby says, like she's explaining the absence without inviting commentary. "She'll be back in an hour." Karen nods. Her mouth is dry. She takes another sip of tea even though it's too hot and the heat bites her tongue. Ruby's gaze flicks to Karen's hand. Not her face. Her hand. Karen doesn't move it. She refuses to move it, as if stillness could be control. Ruby doesn't say anything about the ring. She doesn't ask. She simply reaches into a drawer and takes out a small bottle of hand cream, unscented, plain, and sets it beside Karen's mug. A neutral gesture. Charged underneath. Karen stares at it, feeling something in her chest twist. Kindness does this now. It lands like a bruise. "You don't have to," Karen says too quickly. Ruby's eyebrows lift. "It's just there. she replies, and the words have a second meaning she doesn't claim. It's just there. Like your pain. Like my noticing. Like this pull you don't want named. Karen's lungs pull in air like they've forgotten how to do it. She forces her gaze to the window. Outside, the morning is ordinary. A neighbor's dog barks. A cyclist passes. Someone's lawn sprinkler makes its thin, clicking sweep across grass. Life moves gently around them. Inside, Karen sits with a hand cream bottle she didn't ask for, and a girl, no, a woman, whose attention feels like heat in a room that used to be cold. Just a week, Karen repeats silently. Just a week. But her body doesn't believe in calendars. Later, the boxes become a problem Ruby insists on helping solve. Karen tries to protest. They're not. I can handle them. Ruby ignores the protest the way you ignore a child insisting they can lift something too heavy. She steps into the guest room, takes in the stacks of cardboard like she's assessing a puzzle, then begins opening flaps with the blunt end of a key. I'm not going through your things, Ruby says, reading Karen's alarm before Karen speaks it. We can just make it less chaotic. Karen stands in the doorway, useless. The guest room smells faintly of Susan's laundry detergent and the dusty sweetness of a room not often lived in. Karen's suitcase lies open on the bed like a mouth. Her clothes are still folded, the way she folded them before her life split. Ruby lifts a box labeled kitchen in Karen's own handwriting. The word looks unfamiliar now, like it belongs to a stranger who believed she had a kitchen worth labeling. Ruby sets the box on the floor, crouches and peels back tape carefully. Her hair falls forward, dark against her cheek. She tucks it behind her ear with a quick, practiced motion. Karen's gaze catches on the gesture. It repeats later. Again. Again. A small action. A metronome. Ruby pulls out a stack of dish towels, Karen's dish towels, blue and white, the edges frayed, and holds them up. Are these special? Ruby asks, sincere, almost amused, as if the concept of special dish towels is both ridiculous and tender. Karen almost laughs. The sound gets stuck somewhere behind her ribs. No, she says, then hesitates. They were just there. Ruby's mouth tilts. Then they can be just here, she says, and folds them neatly, smoothing the fabric twice the way Karen saw her smooth the blanket earlier. Karen's skin prickles. Not from the air. From being witnessed. Ruby works with steady hands, offering objects to Karen without commentary. Books, a framed photo Karen cannot bring herself to look at. A small glass bowl Karen bought in Santa Fe because she liked the way it caught light. When Ruby hands it over, her fingers brush Karen's. An accident. Nothing more. Except Karen's body reacts as if it has been called by name. Heat climbs her throat. Her breath stutters. Ruby doesn't pull away quickly. She doesn't clamp down on the moment with apology. She simply lets her fingers lift off Karen's skin at a normal pace, as if not altering time is its own kind of respect. Karen turns abruptly and places the bowl on the dresser. Her hands are not steady. She presses her palms against the wood to stop them from shaking. Behind her, Ruby pauses. Karen can feel the pause like a shadow. You okay? Ruby asks quietly. Karen's first impulse is to say yes. Always yes. Always fine. Always unremarkable. But the word okay feels like a lie that would stain the room. She starts, stops, then tries again. I'm not sure what I am. Ruby doesn't fill the space with reassurance. She doesn't tell Karen she's strong or brave or better off. Ruby just stands there and lets Karen's sentence hang unfinished. Silence stretches. It's not empty. It's full of all the things Karen cannot say. I can't stop seeing it. I can't stop hearing my own voice in that doorway. I don't know how to want anything anymore. Ruby moves to the window and lifts the blinds slightly. Sunlight spills into the room. It catches the glass bowl Karen set down and fractures into small bright shapes across the wall. Karen stares at the light. A part of her wants to cry. A part of her wants to laugh. A part of her wants to crawl into the bed and let the world continue without her. Ruby's voice comes softly, as if she's speaking from a distance. We don't have to unpack everything, just the things you might need. Need? The word hits Karen strangely. Need used to be practical. Toiletries, chargers, clean underwear. Now it feels like a dangerous category. Need is where betrayal lives. Need is where hunger can disguise itself as survival. I'm not staying, Karen says too sharply, and hears the panic underneath. I mean, she swallows. It's temporary. Ruby turns, leaning her shoulder against the wall, arms loose at her sides. She looks younger in this light and older in her stillness. Right, she says. A week. Karen flinches at the echo. Just a week. Ruby's gaze remains steady, but there's no push in it. Only acknowledgement. As if she's naming the rule so it can be seen. Karen rubs her thumb over the bare skin on her ring finger again, and this time she doesn't stop herself. Ruby's eyes drop there once more. Brief. Almost polite. Then her eyes lift back to Karen's face. Karen's stomach tightens and she hates herself for noticing, for feeling the pull, for being grateful to someone for looking at her like she still exists. Later, when Susan returns, sweaty, bright, full of talk about a new class she tried, Karen is grateful for the noise and ashamed of her gratitude. Susan hugs her hard and says, "You're safe here," like safety is something you can promise another person. They eat lunch together, salad, bread, fruit. Mundane. Normal. Ruby cuts strawberries on a cutting board, her knife tapping a slow rhythm. Karen watches the red juice stain the wood and thinks of the stain betrayal leaves, how it seeps into places you didn't know were porous. Susan talks. Ruby answers when spoken to, but her attention flickers to Karen in small, quiet ways. An extra serving spoon offered before Karen asks, a glass of water placed near her elbow, the salt slid closer without a word. Little caregiving gestures. Neutral on the surface. Charged underneath. Karen tries to return them to ordinary. She says, "Thank you." She makes her voice light. She tells herself she's reading too much into everything because she is raw and unmoored. But she cannot ignore the way her body keeps reacting before her mind has finished building explanations. That night, the house settles early. Susan goes to bed with a book and an offhand warning about the old pipes making noise. Karen lies in the guest room listening to the plumbing tick and expand and contract, as if the house itself is trying to get comfortable with its own age. She stares at the ceiling. Her thoughts circle like moths at a porch light. He was inside her. He said my name. I didn't scream. I didn't throw anything. I closed the door softly. No. Not that. The shame of her own calm is almost worse than the betrayal. She keeps replaying the moment, trying to find the part where she became the woman she is now. The woman who can't tell whether she wants to be held or left alone. The woman who feels relief at the sound of another person moving through the hallway. A floorboard creaks. Karen's body stiffens. She hears light footsteps, then a pause outside her door. The pause stretches long enough to become a presence. Karen's heartbeat becomes loud in her ears. She holds her breath without deciding to. The doorknob doesn't turn. The pause ends. Footsteps move away. Karen releases air in a thin, shaky exhale, angry at herself for whatever she was expecting, for whatever she wanted, for the way her skin feels too awake. Just a week, she tells herself in the dark. Just a week. But the thought doesn't calm her. It repeats and repeats until it becomes something else entirely, less a reassurance, more an incantation. As if saying it enough times might keep the line from softening further. In the quiet after the footsteps fade, Karen presses her palm to her throat, feeling her own pulse. She keeps it there, as if holding herself in place. And somewhere down the hall, a door closes gently. Not a slam. Not a declaration. Just a small, deliberate sound. A reminder that she isn't alone in this house. A reminder that being seen is sometimes the most dangerous thing of all. Morning arrives without ceremony. Not in a rush. Not with revelation. Just the slow brightening of the edges of things. Karen wakes before she remembers where she is. For a few seconds there is only the weight of the blanket over her legs, the faint ache in her lower back, the dull, familiar pressure behind her eyes. A body existing. A body still here. Then the house asserts itself. Different ceiling. Different light. Different quiet. The memory of last night slides in sideways, not as an image but as a feeling. The pause outside her door, the almost something that never happened. The way her heart had behaved like it recognized a threat that wasn't a threat at all. Karen closes her eyes again. Not to sleep. Just to delay being a person. She listens. The low murmur of pipes. A car passing somewhere outside. A soft, almost imperceptible thud that might be a cupboard door closing. Someone else is awake. The thought settles in her chest and stays there, neither welcome nor unwelcome. Just present. Karen rolls onto her side and stares at the wall. The pale paint has a small scuff near the baseboard, the shape of a half moon. She fixes on it like it might offer instruction. "You're here for a week." The words feel thinner this morning. Not false, but less sturdy. She waits until she can hear movement again, footsteps, quiet, unhurried, before she gets out of bed. She tells herself this is practical, that she doesn't want to crowd the kitchen, that she doesn't want to be in anyone's way. She does not tell herself the other reason. The hallway smells faintly of coffee. Not strong, not sharp, just the ghost of it. Karen pads toward the kitchen, barefoot, carrying the awkwardness of a guest who doesn't know which parts of the house she's allowed to inhabit. Ruby is at the counter, hair pulled into a loose knot that isn't quite holding. A few strands have escaped and brushed the back of her neck. She's wearing an oversized t-shirt with a faded band logo Karen doesn't recognize, and a pair of soft-looking shorts. Domestic. Unremarkable. Unsettling. Ruby looks up when Karen reaches the doorway. "Morning," she says. It isn't intimate. It isn't distant. It exists in a narrow space between. Karen nods. "Morning." Ruby gestures with her chin toward the coffee maker. It's fresh. Karen moves toward it, grateful for the task. She takes one of Susan's mugs from the cupboard. The same thick ceramic kind as yesterday. A different crack. A different story. The ritual repeats itself. Scoop. Pour. Wait. Familiarity without history. Ruby goes back to slicing an apple on a small cutting board. The knife moves with an easy rhythm. Tap. Slide. Tap. Karen notices, not for the first time, how quiet Ruby is in her movements. Not sneaky. Just economical. Like she doesn't waste motion. Karen pours coffee and adds a splash of milk. The pale swirl blooms and disappears. She stands there longer than necessary. Ruby pushes half the apple slices onto a small plate and slides it toward Karen. Not a question. Not an offering that asks to be acknowledged. Just a fact placed into the world. Karen hesitates. Then sits. The chair scrapes softly against tile. They eat in silence. Not the brittle silence of strangers. Not the charged silence of last night. Something in between. A working silence. Karen watches the sunlight creep across the table, millimeter by millimeter. It touches the edge of Ruby's plate. It catches on the silver ring. It glances off the rim of Karen's mug. Time behaves itself. Karen tells herself she should feel awkward. She tells herself she should feel grateful. Both feel too big for what is actually happening. What is actually happening is smaller. They are sharing a kitchen. They are chewing. They are breathing in the same air. Ruby checks her phone once, frowns at something, then sets it face down again. Karen wonders who texts a 22-year-old this early in the morning. She does not ask. Ruby reaches for the honey without looking, and drizzles a thin line over one apple slice. She eats it, then another. Karen thinks of the bottled hand cream from yesterday, of the way it sits on the nightstand now. Unopened, like a small promise she doesn't know how to accept. "Mom's working late tonight," Ruby says casually, like she's commenting on the weather. "Double shift." Karen nods. Okay. It's a nothing exchange. It feels like something anyway. Karen takes another sip of coffee, even though her hands are already warm. She doesn't know what to do with warmth anymore. It feels suspicious. Temporary. They finish eating at different paces. Ruby washes her plate. Karen stands, unsure whether she should wash hers too, or leave it like a guest. She reaches for it. Ruby says, at the same time, "I've got it." Their hands brush again. Not a collision. Not a stumble. Clean, precise contact. Skin to skin. Karen's fingers are warmer than she expects. Ruby's are cooler. Temperature difference registers like a fact Karen did not ask to learn. They both pull back. Not quickly. Not slowly. Normally. As if this is normal. Karen feels the echo of the touch long after it's over. A faint hum beneath her skin, like something electrical that hasn't found a ground. She moves back to her chair. Ruby washes both plates. Water runs. Life continues. Karen tells herself she is inventing meaning. She tells herself she is too raw to trust her own perceptions. She tells herself she is 44 years old and has no business noticing the temperature of a young woman's hands. All of this is true. None of it stops the noticing. Later, they end up on the couch without discussing it. Not intentionally. Karen sits down with a book she hasn't been able to read. Ruby comes in from her room carrying a laptop and drops onto the other end of the couch, one leg tucked beneath her. They exist parallel to each other. Karen pretends to read. Ruby types. The only sounds are keys clicking, pages turning, the low, steady breathing of two people occupying the same horizontal space. This is the kind of moment Karen used to take for granted in her marriage. Quiet togetherness. The assumption of presence. Now it feels like a fragile thing. Like a glass ornament balanced on the edge of a shelf. Karen tries to focus on the words on the page. They slide past her. Her attention keeps drifting to the rhythm of Ruby's typing. To the way Ruby occasionally bites her lower lip when she's concentrating. To the soft brush of Ruby's knee against the cushion, close enough that Karen can imagine the heat of it without feeling it. No, not that. Karen adjusts her position slightly, creating a polite inch of extra space between them. Ruby doesn't react. Doesn't close the distance. Doesn't widen it either. The neutrality is worse than either option. It gives Karen nowhere to file the moment. At some point, Ruby stops typing. She closes the laptop and sets it on the coffee table. Karen doesn't look up. She feels Ruby's attention shift toward her anyway. "How's the book?" Ruby asks. Karen glances down at the open page, then back up. "I have no idea." Ruby smiles faintly. Not amused. Not mocking. Just acknowledging. "I do that all the time," Ruby says. Read the same paragraph 20 times and still not know what happened. Karen exhales through her nose. Almost a laugh. They sit. The television is off. Neither of them turns it on. Quiet is chosen. Karen realizes this with a small jolt. They could be filling the space with noise. They aren't. "I used to be really good at concentrating," Karen says, surprising herself. Ruby tilts her head slightly, encouraging but not demanding. "On everything," Karen continues. "Work, people, conversations. I was reliable." "Where?" Ruby repeats gently. Karen hears the opening and steps around it. "I don't feel very reliable lately." Ruby considers this. "You're here," she says. Karen's mouth opens. Closes. The simplicity of the statement lands harder than anything poetic could have. She presses her lips together and nods once. They lapse back into silence. Not empty. Weighted. Karen becomes aware of her own breathing again. Of the way it sinks, slowly, with Ruby's. In. Out. In. Out. It feels intimate. It feels accidental. Both at the same time. Later in the afternoon, Karen decides to walk to the corner store. Not because she needs anything. Because she needs motion. Because being in her own head is starting to feel like a closed room with no windows. Ruby stands when Karen mentions it. "I'll come," she says, like it's the obvious answer. Karen almost says she doesn't need company. The words stay in her mouth. They walk side by side down the quiet street. The air smells like warm pavement and cut grass. Somewhere, someone is grilling. It feels like a neighborhood designed to look calm. Ruby kicks a small pebble along the sidewalk, nudging it forward every few steps. The motion repeats. Tap. Roll. Die. Tap. Karen notices. Of course she does. "I used to do that," Karen says without thinking. Ruby looks at her. "Yeah? When I was a kid. I'd pick one rock and see how far I could get it without losing it." Ruby's mouth curves. "Did you ever win?" Karen thinks. "I don't remember," she says. "I just remember doing it." Ruby kicks the pebble again, softer this time. "Maybe that's the point," she says. They walk in companionable quiet after that. Inside the store, they drift through aisles without urgency. Karen picks up toothpaste she doesn't need. Ruby grabs a bag of pretzels and a chocolate bar. At the register, Ruby pays without comment. Karen starts to protest. Stops. Somehow, accepting a $5 kindness feels more dangerous than accepting a place to sleep. They walk back. The sun is lower now. The air cooler. Karen becomes aware, abruptly, that she's comfortable. Not happy. Not healed. But not actively bracing either. The realization scares her. Comfort feels like betrayal of her own pain. Like disloyalty to the version of herself who stood in a doorway and watched everything fall apart. That night, after dinner, Susan retreats to her room early again. Karen and Ruby clean the kitchen together. They move around each other easily, like people who have done this before, even though they haven't. Ruby washes. Karen dries. At some point, Karen hands Ruby a plate. Their fingers touch. Again. This time, neither of them pulls away immediately. Not dramatically. Not with intention. Just a fraction of a second longer than necessary. Karen's breath stutters. Ruby's gaze lifts. They look at each other. No one smiles. No one speaks. The moment doesn't explode. It settles. Like dust in sunlight. Ruby takes the plate. Karen hands her another. The rhythm resumes. But something has shifted. Not into certainty. Not into permission. Into awareness. Later, lying in bed, Karen stares at the ceiling again. Different night. Same position. Different internal weather. She thinks about the way Ruby's fingers felt against hers. About the steadiness in Ruby's eyes. About how being seen by someone who doesn't know her history feels both terrifying and clean. She presses her palm to her throat again. Her pulse is there. Steady. Alive. Just a week, she thinks. The words feel hollow now. Not false. But insufficient. Down the hall, a door closes softly. Karen doesn't know if it's Ruby's. She doesn't try to find out. She lies still, suspended between what has already begun and what she is not ready to name. And that suspension feels occupied. Like a space that now has weight. Like a space that remembers her. The next morning, Karen finds Ruby's sweater draped over the back of the kitchen chair like someone has been there recently enough for warmth to still be possible. Not literally warm. Just suggested. Karen stands in the doorway for a beat too long, coffee in her hand, and watches the sweater as if it might move. As if it might explain itself. It doesn't. Nothing in the house explains itself. Not the quiet. Not the closeness. Not the way a week has started to feel less like a plan, and more like a story Karen didn't consent to. She walks in, sets her mug down, and reaches for the sweater without thinking. The fabric is soft, washed too many times, worn into comfort. She lifts it with 2 fingers, intending to move it to the couch, to make the chair available again, to restore the room to neutrality. The sweater smells faintly of clean skin and laundry detergent. Something in Karen's chest tightens. She holds it a second longer than necessary. No. Not that. She folds it carefully, smoothing the sleeves the way Ruby smooths everything twice. One pass. Another. The repetition feels like a spell. Then she places it on the far end of the couch as if it belongs there, as if this is what the room has been waiting for. Ruby walks in a moment later, barefoot, hair still damp from the shower. She pauses when she sees the sweater folded on the couch. Her eyes flick to Karen. Not accusatory. Not grateful. Something quieter. Karen expects Ruby to say thank you. Or to make a joke. Or to retrieve it. Ruby doesn't. She just walks to the counter, opens the cupboard, and takes out a mug. The same mug she used yesterday. The one with the shallow chip on the rim. She pours coffee without asking. The sound of liquid hitting ceramic feels intimate in a way Karen can't logically justify. They drink in a silence that has become familiar enough to feel chosen. Karen tries to locate herself inside it. In her old life, silence was either comfortable or punishing. This silence is neither. It's attentive. Like something listening back. Ruby leans her hip against the counter and scrolls through her phone for a few seconds. Then she sets it down face up this time. A small act of openness. A notification pops up. Some guy's name, a string of casual words, and Karen looks away quickly, embarrassed by her own noticing. Ruby's mouth shifts like she caught the movement of Karen's eyes. Karen flushes, an immediate, involuntary heat. Ruby doesn't tease her. Ruby doesn't cover the phone either. She simply takes a sip of coffee and says, "It's nothing." Karen's throat tightens. "I didn't." Ruby's gaze holds hers. "You did." A simple statement. Not a trap. Not an accusation. Karen's heart thuds once, hard. She feels suddenly exposed in a way she has never been exposed. Not naked. Not humiliated. Seen. Ruby tilts her head, just slightly. It's okay. Karen doesn't know what it is. Not exactly. She knows what her body does when Ruby's fingers brush hers. She knows what her mind does when Ruby's footsteps pause outside her door. She knows what she feels when Ruby says her name without history attached to it. Karen's voice comes out thinner than she means it to. It's not okay. Ruby doesn't flinch at the contradiction. She nods once like she respects the honesty. Okay, Ruby agrees softly. Then it's not okay. And somehow, being met there, without correction, without reassurance, makes Karen's eyes sting. She looks down at her mug. The coffee has gone slightly cold. She turns it by the handle, slow, like she's steering herself back into safety. I'm not good at this, Karen says. Ruby asks, at what? Karen almost answers too directly. She almost says, at being looked at by you. Instead, she says, at being here. Ruby pushes off the counter and walks to the sink, rinsing her mug even though it isn't necessary. Water runs. A small task to hold something larger back. Karen watches her hands again. The ring. The scar. Ruby turns off the water and faces her. Do you want to go out? Ruby asks. Like anywhere. Karen blinks. Where? Ruby shrugs. Nowhere special. There's a farmer's market a few blocks away, or we can just walk. Karen's first impulse is no. She should stay in. She should keep the boundaries intact. She should not become a person who goes on morning walks with her friend's daughter like it means anything. But the thought of another day inside the house feels suffocating. The thought of movement feels like oxygen. So she nods. Okay, she says, and the word feels like stepping onto a surface that might hold, might not. They leave without telling Susan. Susan is asleep after her late shift. The house is quiet in a different way. The hush of someone resting. The world lowering its volume out of respect. Outside, the air is crisp and bright. Sunlight glances off parked cars. Somewhere a lawnmower starts up, a steady drone that makes the morning feel real. They walk side by side, not touching. Karen notices the small ways Ruby matches her pace. When Karen slows at an intersection, Ruby slows too. When Karen speeds up slightly, Ruby adjusts without comment. It's subtle. It's considerate. Feels like being guided without being led. At the farmer's market, they drift among stalls of peaches and tomatoes, jars of honey, handmade soaps. People brush past them. Voices overlap. Someone laughs loudly. A child cries. World continuity. Life refusing to pause for Karen's private crisis. Ruby picks up a peach, turns it in her hand, presses her thumb lightly against the skin to test ripeness. She looks at Karen over it. This one's good, Ruby says. Karen hears something else in the sentence. This one matters. This one is worth choosing. She hates herself for hearing it and also can't stop. They buy peaches and a small loaf of bread. Ruby insists on paying again. Karen doesn't argue this time. She tells herself it's simpler. She tells herself she's tired of fighting kindness. They carry the bag between them, each holding one handle. Their hands are close but not touching. The proximity is its own quiet pressure. Back home they slice the peaches in the kitchen. Ruby washes them and sets them on a cutting board. Karen finds a knife. Their shoulders brush once when Karen reaches for a plate. A simple accident. Karen's skin remembers it anyway. Ruby's fingers are sticky with juice. She licks one without thinking, then pauses as if she suddenly hears how that could look. Karen looks away, her pulse quickening. No. Not that. Ruby clears her throat. Sorry. Karen's voice comes too fast. It's fine. They stand over the counter, slicing fruit. The knife taps. The juice pools. The air smells sweet and sharp. Karen's phone buzzes on the table. A text from her ex-husband's name lights up the screen. Karen freezes. The room changes temperature. Not literally, but everything inside her shifts, like a door opening to a cold outside. Ruby stills, watching Karen's face. Karen doesn't pick up the phone right away. Her hands hover over the knife, suddenly clumsy, unsafe. She sets the knife down carefully, as if it might cut more than fruit. The buzz stops. A moment passes. Then it buzzes again. Karen swallows. She reaches for the phone, fingertips hesitant. She doesn't open the message. She can't. The act of opening it feels like consent to being heard again. Ruby's voice comes quietly. You don't have to read it. Karen laughs once, bitter and small. It's not like it disappears if I don't. Ruby doesn't reply. She steps closer, not into Karen's space exactly, but near enough that Karen feels her presence like a wall behind her. Karen stares at the phone screen. The name. The familiar letters that suddenly feel foreign. Her mind circles. If I read it, he still has access to me. If I don't, he still has access to me. There is no version where he doesn't. Karen's breath turns shallow. Ruby's hand lifts, hesitates in the air, then lowers again. Ruby doesn't touch Karen. She doesn't take over. She simply stands close, close enough that Karen can feel warmth without contact. Consent in stillness. Karen's eyes sting again. She hates that she is this fragile. She hates that she wants something she doesn't deserve, to be protected, to be held, to have someone else hold the edges of her life together. Karen opens the message. 2 lines. Practical. Cold. I'm coming by Saturday. Tell me what time works. I want to get this done. Karen's stomach twists. Saturday's in 3 days. The week is folding closed faster than she realized. Ruby leans in slightly, reading the message without asking. Karen doesn't stop her. Ruby's jaw tightens. Flash of something hot crosses her expression. Anger, protectiveness, disgust. Then Ruby breathes out and softens her face before she speaks, as if she knows Karen can't handle more heat right now. Saturday, Ruby says, and the word is not neutral. It lands like a countdown. Karen nods slowly. Yeah. Ruby rests her fingertips on the edge of the counter, close to Karen's hand, but not touching it. What do you want to do? Karen's throat constricts. I don't know. Ruby's voice lowers. Do you want him to come here? Karen imagines her ex-husband stepping into Susan's house. Imagines his eyes taking in Ruby. Imagines his voice in this kitchen. She feels instant nausea. No, Karen says, too firmly, and then adds, quieter, no, I don't want him here. Ruby nods once. Okay. Karen waits for Ruby to tell her what to do next. Ruby doesn't. Ruby just stands there, close, and says, You don't have to do it alone. Karen's chest tightens. She hears the offer under the words, I will be near you when it happens. I will not let you disappear. She wants to accept. She also wants to refuse. Both impulses crash into each other. I shouldn't. Karen begins. Ruby watches her, still, attentive. Shouldn't what? Karen's voice falters. I shouldn't lean on you. Ruby's expression doesn't change much, but something in her eyes shifts, softer, older, as if she understands more than she should. Why? Ruby asks. Karen's mouth opens and closes. The truth is too big to shape in a sentence. Because you're young. Because you're Susan's daughter. Because you're you? Because my body is already responding in ways I can't defend. Because if I lean, I might fall. I just shouldn't, Karen repeats, and the repetition is weak. A shield made of paper. Ruby's gaze drops to Karen's hand on the counter. Karen's fingers are curled slightly tense. Ruby's fingertips are an inch away. Ruby doesn't touch her. Instead, Ruby says softly, You can be careful and still let someone be close. Karen's breath catches. Her body reacts before her mind can regulate it. Heat floods through her, then a cold wave of panic. Karen turns her head slightly, as if needing space. Ruby takes the smallest step back, immediately, without being asked. The respect of that movement hurts. Karen's eyes close briefly. She feels herself standing on a narrow line. On one side, isolation, control, loneliness. On the other, something unknown. Something too vivid to fit inside her idea of herself. They finish slicing the peaches in a kind of careful quiet. They eat them standing up at the counter, juice dripping down their fingers. Ruby offers Karen a napkin without looking at her, as if giving Karen the dignity of pretending the offering isn't intimate. Afterward, Ruby washes the cutting board. Karen dries the plates. Their movements sync without discussion. Shared micro-life. Life continuing. It would be easy, Karen thinks, for this to become a routine. For them to fall into a pattern where Ruby makes coffee and Karen dries the plates, and they never name what's living between their hands. The ease is frightening. In the afternoon, Karen takes a shower and stands under the water too long. She lets it hit her shoulders until her skin turns pink. She tries to wash the feeling off. Her ex-husband's name on the screen. Ruby's voice saying you don't have to do it alone. The image of Ruby licking peach juice from her finger. No, not that. She turns off the water and stands in the steam, dripping, staring at the tiled wall. Her thoughts circle the same question in different disguises. What am I doing? What is she doing? What if she's only being kind? What if I'm only being needy? What if it's not only that? Her body answers before her mind can. Her body says, I want to be near her. Karen dresses slowly. She chooses a simple t-shirt and jeans. Nothing that suggests effort. Nothing that suggests she cares how she looks. She looks in the mirror anyway. She looks tired. Her eyes are older than she feels. Her mouth is set in a line she doesn't recognize. She thinks with a sudden aching clarity, I don't want to be invisible. When she steps into the hallway, she hears music from Ruby's room. Something low and moody, not loud enough to invade, just enough to exist. Ruby's door is half open. Karen pauses. She should keep walking. She should go to the guest room and lie down and be alone with her thoughts. She doesn't. She taps lightly on the doorframe. Ruby looks up from her bed where she's sprawled with a notebook. She's writing something, school maybe or something else. She closes the notebook without asking Karen what she saw. Hey, Ruby says. Karen's throat feels tight. Hey. Ruby sits up, legs folding beneath her. The room smells faintly of shampoo and something sweet. Body lotion, maybe. There's a candle on the dresser that hasn't been lit. Karen stands in the doorway like she doesn't know if she's allowed to enter. Ruby doesn't invite her in with words. Ruby simply shifts slightly on the bed, creating space, and pats the edge of the mattress once. A neutral gesture, on the surface. Charged underneath. Karen's pulse jumps. She steps in. She sits on the edge of the bed, careful, as if sitting too fully might mean something she isn't prepared to mean. The mattress dips slightly under her weight, and Ruby's body responds to that dip, moving closer by physics alone. Karen's hands rest on her thighs. Her palms are damp. Ruby watches her, quiet. The music plays in the background, soft enough to feel like atmosphere rather than performance. Karen stares at the carpet, then forces herself to look at Ruby. Ruby's eyes are steady. No rush. No impatience. No triumph. Just attention. Karen swallows. Saturday. Ruby nods. Yeah. Karen's voice turns raw. I'm scared. Ruby's breath catches slightly, like she wasn't expecting the confession, even though she invited it. Of him? Ruby asks gently. Karen shakes her head. Of how it makes me feel. She laughs, a small incredulous sound. I hate that he can still make me feel anything. Ruby's gaze softens. That doesn't mean he owns you. Karen looks away. Tears threaten. She blinks them back hard. Ruby's voice stays quiet. Do you want me to stay with you when he comes? Karen's chest tightens again. The offer is both relief and danger. She nods once. Then, because nodding feels too small for the truth, she says, I don't know what I want. Ruby's mouth parts, like she might say something. Then she stops herself. A restraint. A respect. Ruby shifts closer, slowly. Not invading. Not forcing. She stops when her knee touches Karen's thigh. Contact is light. Barely there. Karen's body reacts instantly, heat spreading, breath catching, skin going electric. Ruby stays still. Waiting. Asking without words. Karen's thoughts scramble. This is Susan's daughter. She's 22. Karen can't even finish the number in her mind without flinching. I'm broken. I'm not supposed to want this. I'm not supposed to be here. But her body doesn't listen to supposed. Karen turns her head toward Ruby. The movement is slow, like she's testing whether she can do it without shattering. Ruby doesn't move closer. Ruby doesn't retreat. Ruby watches her, eyes searching Karen's face for permission. Karen's voice comes out barely audible. Ruby. Ruby's gaze flicks to Karen's mouth, then back to her eyes. Tell me to stop, Ruby whispers. A simple sentence. A line drawn, visible. Karen's breath trembles. She should say stop. She should. Instead, she hears herself say, I don't know how. Ruby's expression changes, just a fraction. Something tender. Something fierce held back. Ruby lifts her hand slowly and touches Karen's cheek with the backs of her fingers. The contact is featherlight. A test. A question. Karen's eyes close before she decides. The touch is warm. Real. Karen feels her whole body lean into it. That leaning, small, involuntary, is the moment of irreversibility. Because Karen recognizes it. She recognizes herself wanting. Ruby's thumb brushes Karen's cheekbone once, almost accidental. Karen inhales sharply. Her skin feels too alive. Ruby's voice is a murmur. Can I? Karen opens her eyes. Ruby's face is close. Not close enough to steal breath. Close enough to alter it. Karen's mind flashes. Susan's smile, Susan's trust, Susan saying you're safe here. Guilt rises fast, sharp, metallic. Karen's throat tightens. This is? Ruby doesn't push. She simply says, I know. Karen stares at her. You don't know. Ruby's mouth softens. I know enough. They sit there, suspended, Ruby's hand still on Karen's cheek. The room full of quiet music, an unlit candle, and the faint scent of peach still on Ruby's fingers. Karen's breath comes in shallow waves. She thinks with a strange clarity, I have spent my whole life being loyal to people who didn't protect me. The thought is not justification. It's simply a fact arriving. Karen's voice is small. If we do this, Ruby's eyes don't leave hers. Then we do it because you want to. Not because you're hurt. Karen swallows. That matters. It matters more than Karen can say. She nods once. Ruby's hand slides from Karen's cheek to the back of her neck, still light, still asking. Ruby leans in slowly, giving Karen time to pull away. Karen doesn't pull away. Their lips meet, soft, brief, almost hesitant. Not hunger. Not performance. A careful contact that feels like stepping into warm water after being cold for too long. Karen's body shudders. Ruby stays gentle. Ruby doesn't take. Ruby simply meets her. Karen's hand lifts, trembling, and rests against Ruby's wrist as if to steady the moment, as if to confirm it's real. The kiss ends before it becomes anything else. Ruby pulls back just enough to look at Karen. Karen's eyes are wide, stunned. Her breathing uneven. Ruby's voice is a whisper. Are you okay? Karen laughs once, broken. No. Ruby nods as if she expected that. Okay. Karen stares at Ruby's mouth, then forces herself to look away, ashamed of the staring, of the wanting. Her hand is still on Ruby's wrist. She can feel Ruby's pulse there. Fast. Ruby covers Karen's hand with her other hand, not trapping it, just holding it in place gently. They sit like that, hands stacked, knees touching, breath settling slowly, while the world outside the room continues without noticing the boundary that just trembled and softened. A car door slams somewhere outside. A dog barks. The house creaks. Life moving gently around them. Karen's mind tries to run backwards. To undo. To rewind to the moment before her body leaned into Ruby's touch. But she can't. Because she felt it. Because she wanted it. Karen's voice comes raw, almost childlike. I can't. Ruby's gaze stays on her. You don't have to decide anything right now. Karen swallows. Tears burn. Susan. Ruby's jaw tightens slightly, but her voice stays soft. I know. Karen pulls her hand away suddenly, as if the contact has become a visible sin. She stands too fast. The room tilts for a second. Ruby doesn't grab her. Ruby doesn't stop her. Ruby sits still, hands resting on her lap, eyes on Karen like an anchor. Karen backs toward the door, breathing hard. I shouldn't have. Ruby's voice cuts in, not harsh, but firm enough to keep Karen from collapsing into self-punishment. Don't. Karen freezes. Ruby's eyes hold hers. Don't talk about yourself like you're disgusting. Karen's throat closes. She shakes her head, not in disagreement, in overwhelm. Ruby stands slowly, giving Karen space. We can pretend it didn't happen, Ruby says quietly, and Karen hears the cost in the sentence. Or we cannot pretend. But either way, you're not disgusting. Karen's eyes fill. She blinks hard, once, twice. I'm leaving, Karen says, even though she doesn't move. I'm going back to the guest room. Ruby nods. Okay. Karen opens the door and steps into the hallway. The air outside Ruby's room feels colder. Less alive. She walks toward the guest room on legs that don't feel like hers. In the guest room, she closes the door and leans her forehead against it. Her breath comes in shaky pulls. Her lips still remember. Her skin still hums. She presses her fingers to her mouth as if she can hold the sensation in place, or wipe it away, or punish herself for it. She doesn't know which. No, not that. She sinks onto the edge of the bed and stares at her hands. She thinks of Saturday, of her ex-husband coming, of the life she is losing, of the life she might be stepping into by accident. She thinks of Ruby's whisper, "Tell me to stop," and the fact that Karen didn't. A knock comes at the door. Soft. 2 taps. Karen's entire body goes still. The knock doesn't repeat. The footsteps move away. Karen exhales shakily and realizes she has been holding her breath like she's waiting for permission to exist. She lies back on the bed without changing her clothes, staring at the ceiling. The house continues around her. A pipe ticks. A door opens and closes somewhere. A muffled voice from Susan's bedroom as she shifts in sleep. Karen's mind loops the moment again and again, each replay slightly different. Ruby's hand on her cheek, the question in her eyes, the gentle meeting of their mouths, the instant guilt. One feeling returns, refusing to leave. Not pleasure, not shame, but the shock of being handled with care. Handled. Seen. Asked. Karen presses her palm to her throat again, feeling her pulse. Fast. And beneath everything. Beneath guilt, beneath fear, beneath the practical reality of Susan existing in the next room, there is a quieter truth settling into place like a stone at the bottom of a lake. Karen cannot go back to the version of herself who had not been kissed like that. She closes her eyes. Not to sleep. Just to keep the world from asking her to choose too soon. Karen doesn't remember falling asleep. She remembers the shape of the ceiling above the guest bed, the way the paint caught the moonlight like a thin film, and the steady insistence of her own pulse in her throat. She remembers telling herself she would leave in the morning. Leave the hallway, leave the kitchen, leave the softness that had made her feel too alive. Then morning arrives, and she is still here. The first thing she hears is Susan's laugh, muffled, coming from the kitchen. The second is Ruby's voice under it, low, careful, threaded with something that tries to sound normal. Karen lies still and lets the sound hit her like weather. A laugh. A voice. A house continuing. Her phone sits on the nightstand beside the unopened hand cream. The bottle's white label is turned slightly toward her, as if it has been watching. She picks it up and twists the cap off with slow, deliberate precision, only to have something simple to do with her hands. She squeezes a small amount into her palm. Cream is cool at first. Then, it warms. She rubs it into her fingers the way she used to rub lotion into her hands after long open houses, after handshakes, after keys passed back and forth between strangers who wanted something from her. The scent is barely there. Clean. Neutral. But her mind isn't neutral. Her mind is still in Ruby's room, still hearing that whisper, "Tell me to stop." Still feeling the exact softness of the contact that hadn't tried to take anything from her. Karen's hands tremble slightly. No. Not that. She presses her palms together until the tremor disappears. When she finally leaves the guest room, she moves like someone entering a room where a conversation might already be about her. The hallway is bright with morning. Sunlight spills across the floorboards, turning ordinary dust into something beautiful, as if the house is trying to romanticize what happened here. Karen refuses the romance. She steps into the kitchen and finds Susan at the stove, hair up, wearing leggings and a tank top, humming to herself while eggs cook in a pan. Ruby leans against the counter with a coffee mug in her hands, eyes on the window, not on Karen. Not looking. That feels like mercy. Susan glances over her shoulder and beams. "There you are. I was about to come check if you were still breathing." Karen forces a smile. "I'm here." Ruby's grip tightens on her mug. Karen notices the movement anyway. The silver ring catches the light, flashes once, disappears. Susan plates the eggs and toast with the easy competence of someone who believes food can solve a day. "Sit, eat." Karen sits because refusing would become a statement. The chair is cool against her legs. The kitchen smells like butter and black pepper, familiar in a way that has started to feel dangerous. Ruby sets a plate in front of Karen without meeting her eyes. A small action. Emotionally neutral on the surface. Charged underneath. Susan talks about her shift schedule, about a coworker who won't stop oversharing, about a gym class she wants to try. Her words fill the room with ordinary life, the kind of life Karen used to have, and then lost. The kind of life that keeps existing even when you don't. Karen nods at the right moments. She swallows eggs she can barely taste. She tries not to look at Ruby's mouth. She tries not to think of Ruby's hand on her cheek. Ruby stays quiet. Not sullen. Not distant. Just careful. She answers Susan's questions politely. She doesn't reach for Karen with her eyes. Karen feels grateful and hollow at the same time. After breakfast, Susan leaves for work. Quick kiss to Ruby's forehead, a squeeze of Karen's shoulder, a bright casual see you later. The front door closes. The house settles into the quieter register it always finds when it holds 2 people instead of 3. Karen stands at the sink and begins washing dishes she didn't cook. Ruby dries without being asked. Their choreography is back, but it isn't easy anymore. It's mindful. Each movement measured, each brush of space avoided by millimeters. When Karen passes Ruby a plate, their fingers nearly touch. They don't. Karen can feel the absence like a small ache in the skin. The water runs. Time moves. Karen tells herself she should speak first. She should reclaim her adulthood. She should name what happened and place it somewhere safe. She can't. Her throat feels locked. Her body is all sensation and warning at once. Ruby breaks the silence with the kind of sentence that isn't really a sentence. I'm sorry. Karen freezes, sponge in hand. You don't have to. Ruby shakes her head once, slow. Not for wanting, she says, as if clarifying. For making it harder. Karen's stomach twists. You didn't make anything. Ruby's gaze stays on the towel she's folding. She smooths it twice, the gesture repeating like a nervous system trying to regulate itself. Karen watches the towel. Watches Ruby's hands. A part of her wants to step closer just to feel warm again. No? Not that. Karen sets the last dish in the rack and turns off the water. The kitchen goes quiet in a way that feels like a held breath. She forces herself to speak. Ruby. Ruby looks up. It's the first time this morning she lets her eyes settle fully on Karen, and the look is not playful, not triumphant, not reckless. It's steady. And that steadiness makes Karen's chest tighten, because it suggests Ruby isn't treating this as a game. Karen's voice comes out rougher than she expects. I can't pretend it didn't happen. Ruby nods once. Okay. Karen swallows. But I also can't. She stops, then tries again. I can't be careless. Ruby's mouth softens. I'm not asking you to be careless. Karen hears the truth in it and still feels fear rise. Susan, she says, because the name is a boundary and a wound at once. Ruby's gaze flicks down, then back up. I know. Silence stretches. In that silence, Karen can feel all her lives pressing against each other. The one where she was a wife. The one where she is now a woman trying to remember her own name. The one that seems to be forming in the space between Ruby's hands and hers. Karen breathes in, then out. I need to tell her, Karen says, and the moment she says it, she knows it's the point of no return. Not because Susan might explode. Because Karen cannot live inside secrecy again. Not after what secrecy did to her marriage. Not after what silence did to her. Ruby's shoulders lift slightly with a held breath. Today, Karen's stomach flips. The idea terrifies her, but delay feels like cowardice. Yes. Ruby's voice is quiet. I'll follow your lead. That sentence, I'll follow your lead, lands somewhere tender in Karen. It recognizes Karen's age without weaponizing it. It doesn't pretend they're equal in experience. It also doesn't make Ruby small. Karen nods once. Thank you. They spend the hours before Susan comes home doing nothing dramatic. That's the strangest part. Life continues. Ruby does laundry. Karen folds towels at the dining table. A mundane domestic loop. Cotton. Warm fabric. The soft thud of folded rectangles stacking. Ruby brings Karen a glass of water. Karen wipes the counter. Ruby tidies mail into a neat pile. They occupy the same rooms with a careful respect, like people living beside a delicate animal they don't want to startle. At one point, Karen opens the refrigerator and finds the peaches they bought days ago, already softer, close to overripe. She takes them out and slices them into a bowl, adding a drizzle of honey the way Ruby did, as if repeating the gesture might anchor something. Ruby watches from the doorway. Karen doesn't invite her closer. Ruby doesn't ask. They eat the peaches standing up, side by side, not touching. Juice runs down Karen's finger. She reaches for a napkin. Ruby offers one at the same time. Their hands overlap for an instant on the napkin's edge. Karen's breath catches. Ruby stills. Neither of them moves for a beat too long. Then Karen takes the napkin and Ruby lets go, as if they both understand the body remembers even when the mind is trying to stay loyal to rules. In the late afternoon, Susan comes home earlier than expected. Keys jangling, coat slipping off one shoulder. They sent me home, someone covered. I could have cried. Karen's stomach drops. Ruby looks at Karen immediately, not panicked, just checking. Are we still doing this? Karen's hands go cold. She feels the urge to postpone, to survive one more day by keeping her mouth shut. But she remembers how it felt to stand in her own doorway and close the door softly, like politeness could undo truth. No, not that. Karen sets down the dish towel she's been folding. Her palms are damp. Susan kicks off her shoes, smiling, then catches the expression on Karen's face. What's wrong? Susan asks, instantly attentive. Karen's heart pounds. She hears her own voice as if from a distance. Can we talk? Susan's smile fades. Of course. Her eyes flick briefly to Ruby, then back to Karen. Is everything okay? Karen almost says yes. Instead, not exactly. They sit in the living room. Susan takes the armchair. Karen sits on the couch. Ruby stays standing near the doorway at first, as if ready to leave. Karen looks at her and makes a small gesture. Stay. Ruby obeys, but she doesn't sit close. She chooses the far edge of the couch, leaving an expanse of cushion between her body and Karen's. A space that says, I'm not trying to trap you. Karen swallows hard. She looks at Susan's face, open, worried, familiar. Her oldest friend. Her safe place. The person who didn't hesitate when Karen called in pieces. Karen's voice shakes just slightly. I need to tell you something, and I don't want you to hear it in a way that makes you feel blindsided. Susan's brow creases. Okay. Karen takes a breath. Then another. It's about Ruby and me, Karen says. Ruby's fingers curl slightly against her thigh. Susan's eyes shift to Ruby, then back. What about you two? Karen feels her pulse in her throat again, the same place she pressed her palm in the dark. Nothing happened that. She stops. That's not true. And pretending at partial truth feels like starting a new betrayal. She tries again, slower. Something happened that I didn't expect, and I didn't want, not at first. Ruby doesn't correct her. She doesn't flinch. She lets Karen own her own confusion. Karen continues, voice steadying with each word. I'm not trying to make you responsible for it. I'm not blaming Ruby. I'm not blaming myself. But I can't. She swallows. I can't stay here and be dishonest. Susan's face is still for a long moment. The silence is so complete that Karen can hear the refrigerator hum from the kitchen. Then Susan's voice comes carefully. Did you sleep with my daughter? Karen's stomach flips. No. The relief that flashes across Susan's face is brief, complicated, immediately replaced by something else. Hurt, alarm, disbelief. Susan's voice stays low. Did you kiss her? Karen closes her eyes for half a beat, then opens them. Yes, she says. Once. Ruby inhales quietly. Susan's eyes close, and Karen watches her friend's mouth tighten as if she is tasting something bitter. Susan puts a hand over her face for a second. Then she lowers it and looks at Karen with a mixture of pain and steadiness that makes Karen's chest ache. When? Susan asks. Karen answers honestly. Yesterday. Susan exhales slowly. Jesus. Ruby's voice comes soft, respectful. Mom. Susan's hand lifts. Not harsh. Just a boundary. Give me a second, Ruby. Ruby nods and goes silent again, her body still, her eyes on Karen like she's bracing to be told to leave. Susan stands and walks to the window. She looks out at the street as if the outside world might give her instructions. The late sun makes her hair glow a little. She looks older than she did this morning. Karen feels suddenly sick with guilt. Susan turns back. Karen, she says, voice rawer now. You came here because you were hurt, because you needed safety. I know, Karen whispers. And Ruby. Susan looks at her daughter, the hurt deepening. Ruby, what were you thinking? Ruby doesn't rush. She doesn't perform shame. She answers with the adult honesty that has been quietly present all week. I was thinking she deserved to be seen, Ruby says. Susan's throat works. She's my friend. Ruby nods. I know. Susan looks back at Karen. And you? What were you thinking? Karen's eyes sting again, but she doesn't look away. I wasn't, she admits. I was feeling? Susan's expression shifts, anger flickering, then grief, then something like reluctant recognition. Susan has known Karen for too long. She knows how Karen carries things, how Karen tries to be good, how Karen gets trapped in that goodness. Susan's voice softens, but it doesn't become easy. What do you want, Karen? The question is a knife and a door at once. Karen takes a long breath. This is the conscious choice. This is where she cannot hide behind confusion. I want to stop living like I'm not allowed to want anything, Karen says quietly. But I don't want to destroy you. I don't want to use Ruby as a bandage, and I don't want to do this in your house. Susan's shoulders drop a fraction, like a tension releasing somewhere. Not forgiveness, not approval, something else. The acknowledgement of boundaries. Susan's voice is unsteady. So what are you saying? Karen's hands curl on her knees. I'm saying, I need to leave. Not because I don't care, because I do. She turns her head toward Ruby, then back. And I need to figure out who I am now, outside of being someone's wife, someone's victim. I need to do that with honesty. Ruby's eyes shine, but she doesn't cry. She holds herself still, as if movement might make this crumble. Susan sinks into the armchair again, suddenly tired. She stares at Karen for a long time. Then quietly she says, I can't pretend I'm okay with this. Karen nods, throat tight. I know. Susan's jaw clenches. But I can't pretend Ruby is a child. Or that you're a predator. Her voice catches on the word as if she hates it. God, I hate that I even thought it. Karen's breath trembles. I hate it too. Susan looks at Ruby, eyes wet now. And you, she says, softer, pained. You don't get to make decisions that turn your mother's home into a secret. Do you understand? Ruby nods, eyes locked on Susan. Yes. Susan looks back at Karen. You can stay tonight, she says, practical through pain. We'll talk more in the morning. But after that, I need space. We all do. Karen's chest aches with gratitude that feels undeserved. Thank you, she whispers. Susan lifts a hand, not quite a wave, not quite a dismissal. She swallows. Just don't lie to me again. I won't, Karen says. And she means it. That night, the house is quiet in a different way. Not the attentive quiet of shared microlife. Quiet full of new knowledge. Karen packs her suitcase at the foot of the guest bed. She folds her clothes slowly, smoothing each piece twice, repeating Ruby's habit as if it can soothe her nervous system. The hand cream sits open on the nightstand, cap off, the smallest smear on her palm still faintly visible. Down the hall, Susan's bedroom door closes early. Ruby's door stays half open for a long time. Karen doesn't go to it. She sits on the edge of the bed and lets her thoughts circle without landing. You broke something. You told the truth. You broke something. You told the truth. Her phone buzzes once, another message from her ex-husband. Karen doesn't open it. Not tonight. Tonight she refuses to let him be the central gravity. In the morning, Karen leaves. Not in a dramatic storm of luggage. Not with tears in the driveway. With the quiet heaviness of a decision lived in the body. Susan stands at the front door, arms crossed over her chest, face composed with effort. They hug awkwardly, briefly. Susan's hand grips Karen's shoulder a second longer than a casual goodbye. You're going to call me, Susan says, half command, half plea. I will, Karen replies. Ruby stands a few steps back, hands at her sides, not approaching. Not trying to claim anything in front of Susan. Karen meets Ruby's eyes across the small distance. Everything they haven't said sits there. Ruby's voice is quiet. Be safe. Karen nods. I will. The urge to say more is a physical ache. Karen keeps it contained. She walks to her car with her keys biting into her palm. Only when she's inside, door closed, does she let herself exhale shakily. She drives to a small extended stay hotel Susan found for her, neutral carpeting, faint smell of cleaning solution, a small kitchenette. A place that asks nothing of her, offers nothing either. That first night alone, Karen makes tea in a paper-thin mug and stares at the blank wall. The silence is absolute. No footsteps. No door closing down the hall. No warmth in the air that belongs to someone else. She should feel relief. Instead, she feels loss. Not of Susan's home. Of the steady, careful attention that had made her remember she still exists. Days pass. Then another week. Karen meets with a divorce attorney. She signs documents. She answers questions that turn her marriage into paperwork. She feels like she's watching herself from above. In the evenings, she goes to the grocery store and buys simple things: bread, fruit, milk. She cooks small meals and eats them standing at the counter because sitting at a table for one feels too final. She uses the hand cream every night. It becomes a ritual, a sensory anchor. Cool, then warm, a reminder that her body is still hers. Susan calls. The first conversation is stiff, careful, then softer, then sometimes sharp again. There are silences on the line that last too long. But Susan doesn't disappear. She tells Karen once bluntly, "I'm not ready to hear about Ruby." Karen doesn't argue. "Okay," she says. And she means it. Ruby texts once, then waits. "I'm here." No pressure. Karen stares at the message for a long time before answering. "Thank you." 2 words. Honest. Safe. Days later, Karen has a small apartment showing. Nothing glamorous, just a second-floor unit with beige walls and a balcony that faces a parking lot. The agent talks too much. Karen nods too often. Afterward, she sits in her car and realizes her hands aren't shaking. That is its own kind of miracle. She texts Susan, "I saw a place. I think I can do this." Susan replies, "You can. Call me tonight." That night, after Susan's call, Karen sits on her balcony with a mug of peppermint tea and listens to the ordinary sounds of the city: cars, distant laughter, a dog barking. Life continuing. Her phone lights up again. "Ruby, did you find somewhere?" Karen hesitates. This is the choice again, not in a kiss, but in the quiet of whether she allows closeness to exist in truth. Karen types slowly. "I'm looking. I'm trying to be careful." Ruby replies almost immediately. "I like careful. I like honest." Karen's throat tightens. She looks up at the darkening sky, at the first star barely visible above streetlights, and feels the old instinct to retreat. "No, not that." She types, "I'm scared of hurting Susan. I'm scared of myself. But I don't regret being seen." There is a pause before Ruby responds. Then, "Neither do I." A week later, Karen signs the lease. She stands in the empty apartment, keys in hand, and lets herself feel the weight of them. Her own keys. Her own door. Her own space. She turns the key in the lock and hears the click. A small, definitive sound. The first night, she brings in a single box and a blanket. She sits on the floor and eats takeout with plastic utensils. She laughs once at herself, 44 and beginning again like a college student. It's not pretty. It's real. A knock comes at the door. Karen's body goes still. She wasn't expecting anyone. She walks to the door slowly, heart pounding, and looks through the peephole. Ruby stands there with a paper bag in one hand and a small potted plant in the other. Her hair is down, loose around her shoulders. Her expression is careful. Karen opens the door. They stare at each other for a moment like two people meeting after a storm, unsure what debris is still falling. Ruby speaks first, voice quiet. "Susan said I could drop this off." She said she doesn't want surprises. Karen's throat tightens. "Okay." Ruby holds up the bag. Food and a mug. Karen's eyes flick to the second object, the mug wrapped in tissue paper. Her chest aches. Ruby steps inside only when Karen steps back, giving space. The apartment smells like cardboard and new paint. There. Echoing. Ruby sets the plant on the counter. "It's a pothos," she says. "It survives almost anything." Karen swallows. The symbolism is too obvious. It still lands. Ruby unwraps the mug and sets it down gently. It's thick ceramic, off-white, with a small crack glazed into the side like a scar turned decorative. Karen stares. Ruby's voice is soft. "I saw it and thought of you. Not because you're broken." She looks at Karen directly. "Because you keep holding warm." Karen's eyes sting. Ruby steps closer, slowly, and stops within reach without crossing into it. Consent in distance. Karen's voice is a whisper. "Susan really said you could come." Ruby nods. "She said..." She's still angry. But she doesn't want to punish me by pretending I don't exist. Ruby's mouth tightens. She also said she trusts you to be decent. Karen's breath catches. I want to be. Ruby's gaze holds hers. Then, be. Silence stretches, full and alive. Karen's hand lifts, hesitates, then lowers to the counter, fingers brushing the crack in the mug as if confirming it's real. Ruby watches the movement. Karen's voice comes soft, honest. I'm not asking you to wait for me. Ruby's eyes soften. I'm not waiting like that. Karen's throat tightens. Then what are you doing? Ruby takes a slow breath. Choosing, she says simply. Choosing you in a way that doesn't ask you to hide. Choosing myself too. Karen feels something in her chest unclench. Not relief. Recognition. She nods once. I can do honest. Ruby steps closer by one careful inch. Karen doesn't retreat. Ruby asks, barely above a whisper, Can I? Karen meets her eyes and answers with the steadiness she's been rebuilding day by day. Yes. This time the kiss is still gentle, still not greedy, still careful. But it has more ground beneath it. It doesn't feel like a stumble. It feels like a choice. When they separate, they remain close. Foreheads almost touching. Breath mingling. Karen's voice breaks on a small laugh. I can't believe this is my life. Ruby's smile is soft. It's your life now. They don't rush into more. They eat the food Ruby brought, sitting on the floor with their backs against the bare wall. They talk in small pieces, about the apartment, about the plant, about nothing and everything. Ruby washes their plastic forks in the tiny sink like it matters. Karen dries them with a dish towel she doesn't own yet. Shared micro-life. Life inside the choice. Later, Ruby stands at the door to leave. Karen's chest tightens, sudden fear of the silence returning. She doesn't try to trap Ruby with that fear. Ruby reaches out and brushes the back of her fingers against Karen's cheek, featherlight familiar now. Karen leans into it without shame. Ruby's voice is quiet. Text me when you're in bed. Karen nods. I will. Ruby pauses, then adds gently, And Karen, yes? Ruby's eyes hold hers. You're not a weak anymore. Karen exhales. The words land like permission. Ruby leaves. Karen closes the door and stands in her new apartment, alone, but not hollow. On the counter, a pothos, a cracked mug, and the faint sense of warmth that doesn't disappear just because someone walked out. She makes peppermint tea. Kettle insists. Steam rises. Karen wraps both hands around the mug and feels the heat seep into her palms. Somewhere inside her, a boundary doesn't break. It simply shifts into a new shape, one that finally includes her. A life can start again without fireworks, just the quiet courage of staying present. What does it cost to want something honest when loyalty has always asked you to disappear? Some stories don't end when the moment fades. They stay with us, asking to be felt. If this story awakens something you recognize, you're welcome to share your truth in the comments. And if this journey stayed with you, consider subscribing to Secret Garden Stories and sharing it with someone who might feel seen. Your support helps the space grow, a world with more love, more honesty, and less silence. Thank you for being here.